This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Isotope, Atom Audio, Lewitt, and Spectra 1964. In fact, you're hearing my voice right now on the Lewitt Pure Tube microphone through the Spectra 1964 STX110D mic pre and C610 comp limiter with Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD and mixed on Atom Audio monitors. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the link in the show notes below. It's a great way to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
For us as people within the studio environment, you are constantly having to not only be creative, but you had to be incredibly technical. You had to actually know how things worked. And I don't mean how machines function. I mean, how did this machine talk to that machine? And how did that machine talk to the desk and the multi-track recorder?
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Howdy, rock stars. I've got a secret to tell you about how I get a consistent sound mixing over 1,000 hours of recording studio rock stars. My secret is using Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron on every single episode. Right now, you are hearing RX breath control, declick, declip, DS, deplosive, voice denoise, ozone multiband compression, neutron EQ, and limiting, all from Isotope. Go to isotope.com/rockstars and use the secret code ROCK10 to get 10% off. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound kind of weak or distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding much closer to professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools, and the best part is that these mixing techniques work for you in any DAW, whether you're on Logic, Cubase, Studio One, Reaper, anything you can think of. If you're ready now to make your best record ever, then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Kevin Paul, an audio engineer, mixer, and mastering engineer who worked with the Kinks at their studio before moving to Mute Records to become head engineer. While there, he worked with pretty much every artist on the label, including Depeche Mode, Goldfrapp, Erasure, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, Luke Slater, and many, many more. He also worked with David Bowie and recorded his album Hours, and after leaving Mute Records, began working for Apple and iTunes in their festival season, where they recorded and mixed Bruno Mars, Adele, Ed Sheeran, and Fleet Foxes, among many, many others. Kevin has recorded and worked with Nick Cave for over 10 years and runs his own online mixing and mastering service as well. He's also the host of the podcast Mixbus with Kevin Paul and has lectured for over 15 years on surround sound mixing and now atmos and immersive mixing. Thank you so much to Simon Taylor for making our introduction. Please welcome Kevin Paul to Recording Studio Rockstars. Kevin, are you ready to rock, my friend?
Yes, sir, I am. Honored to be here.
It's an honor to have you on the show, man. I was really enjoying learning more about you and particularly listening to your discography. Rockstars, we have a playlist of the music that Kevin has created, some of it anyway, some highlights in the show notes, so make sure you click through and listen. It sounds magnificent, dude.
Oh, thank you very much. You know, as a mixing engineer yourself, Lid, you're never quite sure how it sounds, and you generally think most of what you do is not very good anyway. But thanks, appreciate it.
Yeah, actually, just out of curiosity, like, who do you compare? Like, what are the things that you go listen to and you go like, oh, because I feel like I'd probably go listen to yours, and then I actually, that's what I did. Immediately after listening to your discography, I went right back to mine on Samply and press play, and I was like, does mine sound, am I in the ballpark, or am I,
There's one guy who I'm always very jealous of in terms of the sound that he gets, and I scratch my head every time I listen to a new record by him, and that's a UK mix engineer called Alan Moulder.
Oh, yes.
Who I've known for a very long time. And I did interview him actually for my podcast series. I think I almost started the podcast series so I could interview the people that I've worked with who I wanted to know what they're doing.
That's kind of how I feel, I started by interviewing all my friends here in Nashville and just kind of branched out.
And Alan, for me, is definitely one of my heroes in terms of sound. Having said that, people like Andy Wallace, hip-hop producers and mixers like Tony Maserati, Chris Lord-Alge even, he's got a great sound that I sort of always listen to and scratch my head again and go, what am I doing wrong? I think I want to give up. But those are just a few, I reckon.
That's groovy. Didn't Alan... didn't he get nominated for or win a Grammy this year?
Quite possibly. I'm surprised he hasn't won more than one. I think he's got 2 or 3 in the bag somewhere.
I imagine. Yeah, I thought I saw his name up there, unless it was somebody else who reminded me of. And was Alan one of the guys who was using the mutator? Or was that Mike Spike Stent? Or are they all sort of the same batch of friends?
I think they're sort of from what I understood, Spike Stent, Flood, Alan Moulder, they all started in the original Trident studios in London.
Yeah.
As tape ops. And they sort of all grew up together. But the mutator actually was invented by a friend of mine called James Dunbar for a company called Mutronics. And we had the first one at Mute, actually. It's a great piece of equipment. I love this machine.
I remember hearing rumors about it when we were making records. And it was probably like late 90s when we were hearing a lot about that too. And then a YouTube video popped up recently where someone was demonstrating it, and it just sounded awesome.
Yeah, it's a great piece of equipment. Yeah.
All right. Well, cool. So tell us a little bit more about yourself. I mean, you've had quite an awesome history of making records. Tell us about Mute. I don't really know much, if anything. Pretend we know nothing.
Okay. Mute was at one point the largest independent record label, I believe, in Europe. They had obviously some very successful artists. Possibly the most famous is Depeche Mode. They were Daniel Miller, who's the head of the label. He's a guy who only signed music that he liked. And he was probably offered pretty much every major UK recording artist through the 80s and 90s to sign to his label. He has a great passion for something original. And at my time at Mute, what that allowed me to do was to effectively just learn from every single type of sound you could possibly imagine recording, from lush orchestras to hardcore rock bands to #1 selling records, right the way down to things like recording a pneumatic drill and watching or listening to gravel sliding down a chute, and absolutely everything in between. No 2 days were the same. No 2 artists were the same. And I got a lesson that I can only describe as sometimes it was an absolute baptism of fire where you literally had no idea what you were doing because the artists were experimenting way beyond anything you'd ever seen or heard, right the way through to recording some of the best records and some of the biggest artists from around the world. So for me, my time at Mute and the label, it was a very privileged position, incredibly privileged.
And so Mute was both label and studio, or it was label and you guys would be in different studios?
There was a studio at Mute. There was 3 studios at Mute, I should say. I came there. I got to be there through Conk Studios, which I think you explained at the start was owned by the Kinks.
Mm-hmm.
But really, my recording education, my mixing education, my mastering education pretty much began the moment I stepped through the door at Mute. Up until that point, I was an assistant engineer at Conk, where I sat at the back of the room and then eventually worked my way forward where I could, be trusted enough to use a tape machine.
Yeah.
Setting up, I'm not sure many people will know what that is listening, but setting up the sessions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that was great because I worked with a plethora of producers and artists, but the real recording, mixing and mastering education for me began at Mute, because that's when I was effectively pushed to the front of the desk, told to sit in the chair and make music.
Yeah, that's wild. So this was the 80s, was sort of the beginning of that for you?
No, that would be the 90s for me.
90s.
That would be the 90s. That would be 1994.
That's a good start. That's kind of right around where I was starting out too. I was just getting out of school in 95.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty wild, man. I remember hearing stories. One of the bands that I worked with was really into Depeche Mode and sort of turned me onto it. I grew up with a brother who's 2 years younger. So as brothers do, sometimes you can be both close, but you're like, I'm into this, you're into that kind of thing. And so I was growing up being into guitar bands and discovering Frank Zappa and Jimi Hendrix. And my brother was really into Depeche Mode and orchestral OMD.
Maneuvers.
Yeah. And just all the sort of electronic keyboard bands. Of course, he went on to be a keyboardist too. What about you? Did you start out with an instrument in particular?
I'm like many producers, I think I'm a frustrated musician. Liv.
Yeah.
I can hit a keyboard and sound comes out, but whether it's any good or not, actually, it isn't any good. But my real calling was an ability to, first of all, plug things up and make things work. That was my initial kind of gateway into the recording studio.
Did you guys have Radio Shack there? And where you're in England, right? Or you're in London?
We're in London. We had an alternative to Radio Shack. It was called Maplin, which was essentially the same thing, but in England.
Yeah.
So it sold Radio Shack products, but it was called Maplin.
I always felt like my skill was I could figure out what adapter to get to hook this connector into that input jack.
Exactly. Yeah. If it had to be like 6 inches long to get all the connections going,
exactly.
I'm the guy that worked out how to do that.
But then it takes you another almost 20 years to discover like, oh, that's why it sounded so shitty, because I was going through 6 adapters. I didn't know that. The impedance was completely wrong.
Yeah. And from there, originally I was a DJ in the early hip hop and house electronic scene in London.
Nice.
And I like to think that I have an ability to know when something is good. I think I've got fairly good taste, as it were. And I knew when things sounded good. Like if you were mixing 2 records together, I knew I wasn't very musical in terms of scale and chords and all of that kind of stuff, but I knew when things sounded good. And I think I took that into the studio And I think that's kind of where the mixing in the studio came from. It's for me where I feel most comfortable, and it's for me where I think I can add the most value to the record making process.
Yeah. As a DJ, you were setting the stage for artists like Fatboy Slim to come along later and
yeah, he's
take
probably
off with it, right?
Slightly better than me, but yeah, that's the kind of vibe. Yeah, the general kind of thing. Yeah, for sure.
That's cool, man. That's great. Boy, so many cool things in your world. I was over in London about 91, so who knows? Maybe we were going out to some of the same clubs before you,
almost certainly,
got settled in. I was only there for a couple of months, though, but it was definitely a cool scene. A lot of great music going on there.
Yeah.
All right, so you are playing a little bit of keyboards. You're a one-note wonder, and you find your way into a studio. Did you have schooling before that too, in the recording stuff, or did you just somehow work your way into a studio setting?
At the time I wanted to work in the studio, there was one place in London where you could learn studio engineering. This was a place that the cost of the course in 1991 would have been £10,000, which today would be, 40,
That's
50,
enormous,
60.
yeah.
Yeah, it was huge, right? And the place was called the School of Audio Engineering, SAE. And that was the only place that you could privately learn how to be a sound engineer.
That's kind of amazing. I think of SAE as a rather affordable place to go to school, although I haven't signed up for one. So I don't know if times have changed. Yeah, it probably is. Yeah,
I think it is now relatively. But this was the only place.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but back then it would have made sense a little bit more too, because we were coming out of the 80s when going into recording and making records was quite lucrative, Yes.
And there was only one other place in the UK where you could learn studio recording, and that was a Tonmeister course in Salford University or Manchester University, and that was only offered to the 10 best musicians in the country.
Wow.
So that was it. Those were the choices. And we still, obviously, we had the old-fashioned route where you went to a studio and became a tape op or night's reception or whatever. And that's the way that I had to do it. I had to go through that way, actually.
Now, correct me if I'm getting my locations wrong, but would Thomas Dolby have been kicking around the scene at that point in the UK?
I couldn't remember if that was.
You guys didn't get a chance to work together.
No, we didn't. I mean, I worked with Thomas at Mute because he knew Daniel really well. So much later, I would have definitely bumped into him.
Yeah.
And said hello, but he was quite well established at that point.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, let's see. I think we're going to want to hear some stories from Conch Studios. So, I mean, were you working with the Kinks there, or was this their studio and you were doing other projects while you were there?
It was both. They were making a record at the time. And obviously, their history is pretty comprehensive, actually. I wasn't really into that kind of music. I wasn't really into music at all until sort of hip hop and electronic music came out. That was the first music that really kind of grabbed hold of me. And to hear the Kinks do rehearsals in the studio, you put your ear to the door and go, I know that one. Yeah. And then they do another song and they go, hold on, I know that one too. And that one. And there's another one that I know. And you kind of realize really quickly how big they were as a band.
Yeah.
And Ray Davis, he took quite a shine to me, thankfully, and allowed me to sit in with the sessions. So that was great. And then in terms of the artists that we worked with, we had a whole range of artists from acid jazz artists on Giles Peterson's Talking Loud label. We had lots of bands from Mute, which is one of the reasons why I got invited to come over to Mute. We did lots of rock, lots of classical. And again, we had quite a bit of a heyday in the 3 years or so that I was there, where every artist coming through the studio were just making great records. You know, some of them, most of them you've probably never heard of, as was the way it went years ago. That's what happened. You know, our record labels signed maybe 10 artists a year. Only 2 or 3 would become successful. The other 8 you'd never hear of again. But you still made great records with them. And I worked with loads of producers like Flood, Alan Moulder, Gil Norton, Paul Corquette, Mark Waterman. I could just go on and on really with the people that I worked with. And you know yourself, the recording studio environment, it's a lifestyle choice.
Absolutely.
It's not something that you kind of dip in and dip out of. So for me,
as the Eagle said, you can check in, but you can never check out.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, it was a real calling. It came at the right time in my life, where I wanted to do something and have a career, and the stars kind of aligned in some way, and I was fortunate enough to be there. And I asked the studio manager during the interview to give me an opportunity to work there. She said, I'm not really sure. She looked through the diary and she said, okay, we got a session here for 2 weeks. It's on January the 21st. I still remember the date. Dave Erringer, who is a very successful engineer and producer in England, he's the house engineer. He's going to work there. So you can work with Dave and we'll see how you get on. And I stayed there for like over 2.5 years. So
you showed up first time asking for a paid gig.
I to be honest, I wasn't really interested in getting paid. I just wanted the gig.
Yeah.
You know, and they were very kind enough to pay me a very small salary at the time. Generally, studios worked on the principle that you got a small retainer, but you got a lot of overtime. And the overtime is where you made a decent salary.
Interesting.
That was how the studios kind of worked back then.
Probably because they were able to charge the artists for the overtime sessions too, and nobody wanted to work them.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
That's clever. My studio is proudly powered by OWC, and I love how it's improved my workflow. OWC can connect all your audio work drives, trackballs, mix controllers, MIDI keyboards, audio interfaces, displays, or cameras so that you can work fast and focus on making your best record ever. Go look at the Mini Stack STX, Thunderbay 4, or Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock at macsales.com/rockstars to find the perfect solution for your studio from OWC. Gosh, what do I want to ask about that? I mean, the Kinks, what an amazing band those guys are and were. And my girlfriend was just quoting Lola to me just the other night. She's great. She may not quite nail the melody, but she knows all the words to everything she can remember.
Fantastic. She's a great song.
So that's a good resource for me because I can probably figure out the chords. Well, let's see. Where did you go from there? So you were at Mute for quite a while. I mean, there's so much to ask about all of it, but I don't want to derail you because we probably got lots to cover. Yeah,
well, I mean, you know, like I said to you before we started, I've been really lucky. You know, I could probably count on my 2 hands how many times I've worked in sessions that I didn't enjoy the music or I didn't enjoy the people, and very rarely, you know, you don't enjoy both, and it becomes kind of like work.
Yeah.
But for me, I could probably count on 2 hands the amount of times it was both. I've always taken something from the job, whether it's music or people. If I don't understand the music, I love the people. If I don't love the people, I love the music. And most of the time, those things the two are together. At Mute, like I said to you, we just did so many different kinds of things. And as the engineer in the studio, you were working with a lot of first-time studio people, or you were working with avant-garde kind of experimental people. So there kind of was no real expectation from you. And you were there to assist and facilitate the artist's creativity. And so for me, I just had to just enjoy it, really. And I'm very lucky to be able to do that. I'm not sure. I think we'll go on to that a bit later with some of the questions you wanted to ask me, possibly. Talk about some things about, what anyway. I think
no,
so.
So go ahead. You can jump to one. You just pick anyone you want.
Well, I think you sort of wrote me one. What would you say to your younger self? For instance?
That one's my closing question. You can save that one if you want.
Okay, so we'll save that one.
You can give us a hint now if you want.
Let's save that one. Let's save that one.
I can hit one of the other ones. Inspirational quote or somebody that really inspired you. I mean, you've already mentioned a bunch of people that inspired you too.
Okay, so one of my favorite quotes is from Quincy Jones. And he says a quote, and I'm paraphrasing here: always leave room for God to come into the studio. And I think what he's meaning by that is leave the space for the magic to happen. Don't create the environment where everything is rigid and organized and structured. Always leave that element of space for artists to just create, because it's that moment that everyone is looking for, I think, in the studio.
The moment of discovery. You want to hear that, and
yes,
you want to visualize it by listening to the record.
Yes, exactly. And I think sometimes producers, when they first start, they're trying to impose themselves and they're trying to define them. Not
me. I never did that.
No? Because it's important to us, right? We all have our egos, and we all have to kind of learn to let that ego kind of sit back a lot and allow whatever's happening to happen. And sometimes that can take an hour. Sometimes that can take 2 days. Sometimes that can take 5 minutes. And I think that quote made me realize and readjust a lot of the approaches that I make in the studio, actually, as a conductor of people, not necessarily technically. I think technically you still got to do the things that you still got to do. But in terms of the emotional environment that you're creating, that for me was a real change, actually, in my style and approach to the studio.
Do you think that Quincy Jones meant don't do any rehearsal and don't get ready for the session and set up the microphones before the band gets there?
Possibly. I couldn't tell you, but I don't think so. I'm reading it the way I see it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's great advice, and things that come to mind that reminds me of. One of them is the question of harmony. The times where you're in the studio and you think, oh, we could put a harmony on that. Oh, well, percussion is another good one.
Yeah.
Oh, we could put tambourine and shaker and other
cowbell.
things
Let's
on.
get some cowbell going.
Well, no, let's not be disrespectful to the cowbell. Come on, I put it every chance I get, I'm putting that on. But, it's like the idea of harmony, and somebody once suggested to me, it can be okay to not add harmony to something because it leaves room for you to hear it in your head when you're listening too. So it's like a moment, It's like leave room for the gods to come in the studio, leave room for the gods to come in even in the listening experience.
100%, definitely. And also I think, I mean, I when I'm producing a band maybe from scratch, like, so from recording, I generally don't really say a lot. I'm not conducting anything, because all I want to do at that initial stages is I just want the band to express themselves. I want to see how far the band can go without me. And then if there's a moment where people are stuck or they're not sure, then I can offer my opinion or I can offer my suggestion about maybe what to do. And when we're recording, I like to just do everything. Like if anyone's got the craziest ideas where you think, I don't know if that's going to work, well, until I hear it, how do I know if it's not going to work?
Right.
And from that idea, you never know if it isn't going to work, where it could go. It could go to somewhere that will work.
Yeah, you also don't know if it is going to work. Like,
yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So for me, during the recording process, my approach is pretty much, you guys do what you want. I'm just going to record you. That's all I really want to do. I'll come in with my odd funky suggestions and my kind of ideas where I get excited because, you know, I like to get excited too in the studio.
Yeah.
But really that initial recording stage is for me all about artist expression.
Yeah. I mean, it's a thing you really have to go through personally. You have to experience the times where you're in the studio and you, as an engineer or a producer, you get excited about an idea and you hear it in your head and you want to communicate it to the artist. And then you do it and you kill the whole vibe because you're trying too hard to get your idea out there.
Potentially, yeah.
You know, and sometimes it works and sometimes it just wears everybody out. But it's like, if you don't go through that, you don't know what it is too at first, I think.
Yeah, that's right. I think you're right there.
And then you begin to discover that. And then I found myself growing into being able to just relax into a session and discover where things are and learn to ask permission of the band too, if they'd appreciate some feedback, if I hear something, you know, and.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I've worked with bands who although there is a producer in role in the studio, they kind of don't want to be produced. What they want is some kind of guidance as to whether what they're doing is good or bad. You know, they're not necessarily interested in the opinion of the producer, but he's still present in the studio and he's there as a confidant almost, someone to bounce off, really. You know, and that's another thing that I think as a up and coming producer is to work out very quickly what kind of role are you expected to play here.
All right. So I know a question I want to ask you about that time. So you're working with all these, and I forgot, did you say that New Order was one of those bands that you worked with as well?
No, not New Order. Nick Cave.
Nick Cave, yes, indeed.
David Bowie.
Yep. I'm thinking of the artists like Depeche Mode and that sort of era of programmed music and that mix of keyboard and synths and drum machines and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you have some cool stories of stuff that you learned about how that stuff was produced back then versus what we take for granted these days. You know, now you live in a world of computers and I mean, you know, anybody coming, we all do, but people starting out, it's just like, oh, you just go over to the loop bin and you drag in something and there it is. But early on, you know, there was MIDI, but then there were also people doing control voltages and sequencing, you know, triggered CV sequencing, gate sequencing, I guess, and things like that to just get a really tight sound. At least that's some of the stories that I've heard. And I wonder if that's true from your experience.
Well, I mean, you know, at that time in, you know, that 90s kind of vibe, there was, you know, sometimes it took 12 hours to get two machines to talk to each other.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like today where you just call up an instrument and then another instrument and then another instrument and in half an hour you've got the basis of a record. You know, sometimes you would literally be spending so long just to get machines to work. But what came from that was an opportunity to do something exciting because you were excited that it worked. You were literally like, oh my God, two machines are talking, let's start doing something, you know, and you were living on the edge. You were hoping that this could continue for another 12 hours. And yes, you'd be in the studio for 24 hours, because when I started out in 1991, the studio was the only place that you could make a record. It's now the last place you go to make a record.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know, so there's such a massive jump from what was to what is. And we were always, every artist, and particularly an artist like Depeche Mode, they were constantly looking to see, we've got a new piece of equipment, how far can we push that piece of equipment before we get bored of it, or until it becomes repetitive. So there was a constant invention around the equipment that you used. And equipment was coming out like plugins were coming out today, right? Plugins come out like every week. But people were literally producing pieces of equipment every week. And if you were like Depeche Mode, you could buy things every week. So every day, producers and artists were coming into the studio going, hey, look, I got my new box. Let's plug it in. And we'd make a record with it, you know? So it was...
And that's fun for you as an engineer. I mean, for me, it was too, because it's like, we're like, we get to play with new shit all day long. I love it. Yeah.
You know, and so for us as people within the studio environment, you were constantly having to not only be creative, but you had to be incredibly technical. You had to actually know how things worked. And I don't mean how machines functioned. I mean, how did this machine talk to that machine? Yeah. And how did that machine talk to the desk and the multi-track recorder? And, you know, there would be occasions where, you know, I can tell many stories where it's 4 o'clock in the morning, you're about to save and finish the song, and then something just stops working.
Yeah.
And that's the main part of the track. And you're like, holy, can we swear on the podcast?
Oh, yeah, you can swear. Say whatever shit you want to say.
Yeah, so, and you'd be like, holy shit, what are we going to do now? And you would have to wait or come back another day. You can't just save as and pick it up the next day.
Peter, I'm sorry, I have a request. Would you be so kind as to say bloody hell in that sentence for us, please?
In what sentence?
I don't know, anyone.
And then you would say, you know, oh, bloody hell.
Thank you.
You'd say, bloody hell, it's not working. Like, and you would literally be going, we can't finish the record. Like, what are we going to do? And on occasions, you just have to come back another day, spend another 5 hours setting up everything.
Yeah.
And luckily, if you press play, it would all work. And if it worked once, you were like, holy shit, it's working. Quick, let's do something while it's working.
I guess I'm lucky because sometimes it still takes me 12 hours to get things working in the studio, and I've got a computer running.
No, I mean, and look, no one's saying that anyone wants to go back to that. I don't. That was a nightmare, you know.
I'm with you that hooking things up and having a challenge to get something going is still a thrilling feeling. One of the places that might be unexpected to describe it that way, but I still enjoy all the time is tracking a band. Yes. I've always described it as, I like to think of it as you build the machine, and the machine is the band. It's the miking of the band. It's setting them up. It's getting them into headphones. It's getting everybody on the same page. And it's like being on a club team sport or something, and you're all trying to score a goal together, you know, when you finally print that take.
Yeah, and also I think, like, when we went to the studio, you had a clock on the wall. Well, maybe you didn't have the clock on the wall, but you had an imaginary clock that was counting down the time. But I think also it was counting down the creativity, because everyone's coming into the studio, they're really hyped up, they're really excited, and there's nothing more draining for creativity than things not working.
Yeah.
You know? So, and these machines were so new, and this technology was so new, You know, I remember working on one of the first ever Pro Tools systems in the UK.
Wow. Was it the Macintosh SE, that computer, or was it before that even?
No, it was Pro
after?
Tools. It was a 16-track Pro Tools, right? So it was four. They had the 4-channel ones. I can't remember the prefix of the number, the 401 or 404, whatever it was. And it was a 16-track Pro Tools. And the guy just had constant nightmares with it. It never worked, you know. And they flew the guy out to San Francisco. He set it all up. He started using it. And they suddenly went, well, why are you using it like that? And he goes, well, this is how you make records. He said, oh, no, you can't use Pro Tools like that. And he said, well, take it away, because this is not how you make records.
Atom Audio can provide all your monitor needs. Whether you're setting up a first-time home studio for recording music or podcasts, or a world-class full-size studio for professional mixing and mastering in stereo or immersive sound. Featuring the XART tweeter and custom DSP onboard processing, the A-series monitors will perfectly adapt to your studio. Get the Atom Audio monitors and subwoofers that are right for you with an extended 5-year warranty at atomaudio.com. You make records by understanding how to connect the SCSI cable.
Exactly. And how the way the software worked. And it was things like that then Pro Tools started actually speaking to artists and engineers and programmers and saying, well, how should we design the software to work? Because they hadn't really thought about it that much until that stage. They just wanted something to record things. I'm going to give them a shout out right now.
I'm going to say that I was actually just communicating this to some folks at Avid recently, that now more than ever, I feel like things are really happening with Pro Tools and moving forward, and, listening to what the creators are doing and delivering it and stuff. So,
well, I think once technology companies started doing that, the evolution of technology moved a lot quicker, actually, for artists. And it was the same. You'd get a piece of equipment from Japan and you try and read the instruction manual, and it's a word-for-word translation from Japanese to English, and made no sense. So you were like, fuck that. Let's just play with it and see what we wanted to do and try and get it to work.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of the thrill of making records in those days.
So to describe some of those challenges to the rock stars too, you had a lot of physical separated items. So you'd have like the computer, you might have a separate sequencer, you'd have a tape machine, you'd have the console, and all these things had to be talking to each other through cables. And unlike today, where you just plug in the USB cable, maybe, and it all just kind of magically works under the hood, or maybe magically doesn't. There were a lot of challenges, and you had to have clocks synchronized and MIDI, talking the right kind of way and all kinds of stuff.
It was fun, but not fun.
And when I think about you talking about taking the time to set it up too, and I feel like I hear in your discography, I hear an appreciation on some of those records for minimalism in production too, like where fewer elements sounding more proudly in the mix. You know what I mean? Like instead of just filling everything up. And do you feel like you see more? What's a comment there? Do you feel like sometimes with the challenges of setting up, there's less filling everything up, or am I just looking for something that doesn't exist? In other words, were people putting crap on records back then just like they might be today, or is that not a thing to you?
Well, I am always trying to create space in the records. I'm always looking to, funnily enough, I was working on a track this week, actually. The artist, great song, had loads of vocals, loads of different parts, and I just felt that there was too much going on. As a producer, as a listener, I was just sitting there going, what is it that my ears are supposed to be listening to? So first of all, I reach out to the artist and say, look, I know you sent me all this stuff to mix, but I'm wondering if you would mind me maybe taking a few things out just to give a bit more definition in the song to help the listener know what they should be listening to.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, sure, of course, no problem. He was very nice. He said, no problem. And I just went through and I didn't mute much. I maybe muted 2 or 3 parts throughout the track, but it instantly created space for your ears to know what they should be listening to.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of cooking analogies when I'm teaching. And I think cooking and mixing are incredibly similar. Because you go into a kitchen and there's loads of ingredients, but actually if you look at the best chefs in the world, they're only using half a dozen of them.
Yeah.
And it's the balance of them that's really important. And I think within mixing, it's the same kind of approach. It's not about getting everything in there. It's about making sure that everything that is in there can be heard properly.
You know, it's funny because when you think about minimal ingredients in cooking too, you begin to appreciate the importance of really high quality ingredients.
Yes.
You don't want to use crappy vegetables and fruit and you know, meats and whatever. I'm vegan, so I'm not using meats anymore. But you know, and the spices similarly, you know, I don't know how much variety you find in salts, maybe lots, but certainly in herbs and things like that.
Yeah.
Do you say herbs?
Herbs. Yeah, we got herbs.
Excellent. I got you to say another thing that sounds really awesome in English. We'll work on schedule next.
Okay. Schedule. Okay. Not schedule.
Schedule. And maybe we'll even throw in a Z just for good measure. But same thing with recording and music. You know, the whole concept of making sure that the sounds you capture in the first place are excellent really makes, and the production is excellent, makes mixing excellent.
I was listening to Rick Rubin quite recently. He was talking about track orders on albums. And he said something, again, just paraphrasing, which I found I could relate to very much within mixing, actually. And he said something along the lines of, okay, so we've recorded and mixed, I don't know, let's say we've mixed 14 songs. How do we decide what ones go on the record? And he said something along the lines of, first of all, let's establish which of the songs we can't live without. Okay, so there might be 6 of those where everyone agrees, no, these are the essential songs. You can't have the record without them. And then we start looking at all of the rest of the songs to see whether they fit with those 6 songs or 5 songs. And once you've gone through all of the remaining stuff, there's your record, whether it's 8 songs, 10 songs, 12, 14 songs. And I found myself thinking about mixing in that way, actually, where I know I said when I record bands, I let them do everything. That's great. Or when people send me stuff, they give me loads of things. I like to work out what I can't live without. And then I try to introduce all of the other bits as they go along. And if I think that they should definitely be there, they should be there. And if I don't, I'm not afraid to say to the artist, I don't want that. I don't think that works. Or let's do 2 versions without it, one with, one without. And I find that that's a really good way to work out whether a sound or a part should belong in a song.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. Because there usually are things in a production that are clearly the core elements of a song. And then there's
Yes.
a lot of extra stuff that we add on top of that. And it's a tricky thing. It could be percussion. Well, it could just be the legato, part that comes in the chorus or the pre-chorus and just gives it that lift.
And sometimes artists and producers get attached to things because they spent 7 hours doing something. So it's got to be in the track because I've spent 7 hours of my creative ability working that stuff out. And I think you have to be able to be objective and go, actually, without it, there's more space for everything else.
Yeah, that's one of the skills that I feel like we have to learn is we have to learn how to be able to work our ass off on something and very quickly look at it and go, it's not better, delete. Yeah. And not feel bad about that. Not only not feel bad about that, but actually feel good because that's the process.
Yeah, that is. And
you're winning if you do that.
That requires a lot of brave. You have to be very brave to do that, right? You have to actually, it takes a brave person to stick their hand up and go, you know what, guys, I don't like that. Or I like more of this, actually. And that does come through experience. I'm pretty sure. And again, coming back to cooking, some people are not very good at cooking. Some people are absolutely brilliant. They can go straight into the kitchen, look at 6 ingredients and make you a meal where you go, wow, this tastes amazing. Whereas some people go and look at those same 6 ingredients and it tastes like a dog's dinner, And the reality is, the good news is you can learn how to go from the dog's dinner to something that tastes amazing. But that takes a lot of practice and a lot of time and a lot of commitment, And maybe what the easiest thing to do is just to get someone like yourself or me to do it, because we kind of know how to hopefully get it to a place where it sounds good.
I love it. If you are mixing music, podcasts, or audio for video and you want it to sound amazing, then iZotope has got your back. With RX, Ozone, Neoverb, Nectar, and Vocal Synth, you'll have a collection of powerful apps and plugins that will help you get a professional sound in no time. Whether you're looking to clean up your vocal recordings with RX, master your tracks with Ozone, or add depth and ambience to your mixes with Neoverb, iZotope is your magic wand for awesomeness. Plus, with Nectar and Vocal Synth, you can easily add creative effects and unique textures to your vocals and instruments. From subtle mix enhancements to extreme sound design, iZotope takes your music and podcast productions to the next level. Go to iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off. Howdy, Rockstars. We're back now for the jam session, the second half of the show. My guest today is Kevin Paul, joining us from the UK. And Kevin, are you ready to jam, dude?
I've been jamming for quite a while, so let's go.
I love it, man. And, just for transparency, Rockstars, he's recording his voice on a very nice mic, and I'm hearing it through the Zoom mic. But I could see that he leaned into the mic to give you that big, full radio effect right in that moment. So I can't wait to hear it back. Awesome, dude. Well, so Kevin, tell us a little bit about your studio now. You've learned a great deal about mixing. You've done a lot of things. We live in the future. The future is behind us already at this point. So I'm guessing that are you doing a lot of mixing now in a home studio setting? Are you still going to, big 90 input consoles to mix? What does mixing mean to you these days?
It depends on the client, really. I mean, like a lot of engineers, whether you're mixing top 10 records or unsigned artists, you're doing a lot of work at home. You're in your own little environment. I got my little space here. It's really small, but I know it really well. I'm really comfortable with it. I'm all digital.
Okay.
I'm all in the box.
Let's have you, if you don't mind, describe the physical room to us. I mean, what's the shape and size generally?
Oh my God. It's absolutely tiny. I've barely got enough space with all the equipment in here just for me.
Is it hopefully a cube shape?
It is a cube shape.
Is it really?
It's a rectangle, actually. It's a rectangle. But I've got a baffle on the top of the ceiling, and I've got some panels all the way around just to reduce my reflections.
So it's truly a home studio. Like anybody who's got a home studio, you're dealing with the same stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
well, so what are some of the challenges of setting up a mix room that you can feel comfortable in a home environment? I mean, if you were to go check your science book, you'd read, wait a minute, what do you mean a square room doesn't work or a cube room? But, a lot of the times we got what we got, so we got to deal with it and make it work, right?
I mean, for me, the only problem in the room is the low end.
Right.
I've as which is common pretty much for every room. You can sort out your mid-range, you can sort out your high-end, your baffles and your panels generally can be used to control that, even in the smallest or biggest of rooms. It's the low end that's always the problem. I've got a couple of things you can see directly behind me. You can see the door to the studio. If I open that, the corridor's there, and that effectively becomes my bass trap. I can open the door and the bass will just go out so they won't come back into the room.
Interesting.
So that's one way that I can deal with that. The other way I can really lock into my low end is on my headphones, which I've been using for quite a while.
What headphones are those?
These are made by a company called Ollo Audio, OLLO.
I have a pair. I don't know if I have the same model, but they're really great.
I love them. I've used them for a long, long time. For me, they offer, pound for pound, I think they're possibly the best value headphones I've ever used. You can obviously spend thousands of pounds on your headphones, but when I'm always talking to people about buying equipment, you've always got to ask yourself, okay, if I'm going to spend £1,500, if I'm going to spend £1,500 on headphones, how much more are they going to give me than I spend £500 on headphones? Are they going to give me 200-300% more? Probably not. So let's see where you can find your price point that allows you to then maybe invest in other areas. And it's the same with speakers, and it's the same with any other piece of equipment that you have.
Well, we shouldn't forget the rock stars. You're going to, your headphones are important, but also like what you're plugging your headphones into is important too. I mean, most of us don't have tons of choices unless you go buy something fancy. But what I would say, what comes to mind to me about the, is it Ollo or Olo?
I say Ollo.
Ollo, okay.
O-double-L-O.
Yeah, so those headphones they reminded me of the times, because I've listened to a lot of different headphones, and there are many that can sound really great, but the Olos reminded me of when I'd get a pair of vintage speakers and a tube receiver and plug it in and then go, oh shit, that sounds great. Something about it had that reminded me of that. It was just like high fidelity and kind of an old school.
And what I like about them the most is that I can wear them for long periods of time. I don't get tired. Right. And that's really important.
Yeah. It's exhausting to have headphones on your head for a long time.
Yeah, for an hour or so, 2 hours, you think, oh, you take them off and your ears are hurting. I don't have that with my Ollos. And ones...
Can I ask one other thing, a detail I noticed is you also have glasses on. And that could be an issue, is how do the glasses and the headphones fit together, right?
I mean, I generally only wear glasses when I'm looking at the monitor or my phone. I don't need them without. I got long vision. It's only short-sighted that I have the problem. But I think you just get used to it, right? I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. These particular model of headphones are the new ones that they have, which have been designed for immersive audio.
Oh, groovy. What's the model on that?
This is S5. These are the S5X. I've used the S4X for a very long time, but these are the new ones, and they're specifically designed for immersive audio and mixing on headphones for binaural.
The S4X is what I have.
Yeah, they're great. I love these headphones.
That's very cool. So let's just go there. Let's talk a little bit about, well, you know what? I'll make a note. We'll come back because I'm sure there's more to talk about with your studio. So what are the tools that you use when you're working? Are you in Pro Tools? What sort of a computer, gives you the kind of power that you need, just generally speaking? Do you like to use mixing controllers, or are you just mouse button and click, all those kind of basic things?
Okay, so the studio is based around an Apple Trashcan 8-core with, I don't know, I can't remember, 32 gigabytes. That's been, the audio interface is the Apollo X4 UAD. I'm always a big fan of UAD. I love their plugins. I've used them for a very long time. My monitors are Dynaudio BM6s, the original version of the BM6, not the Mark II or Mark III. There's something about the BM6s that just have a very, very nice character to them. The amplifiers in them are much better, or are very different from the newer versions.
Do I recall a little green digital display on the bottom of those guys or something like that?
No, that's the Air ones. You're thinking of the Airs.
Okay.
These are even older than that. They came out. They were one of the first self-powered monitors that Dynaudio have used. I've used Dynaudio's got to be for 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
And I really love them. I've got my iPod speakers that I use, my boombox speakers. I do have a little boombox, actually, like a JVC boombox that I use.
Can you talk about,
modded.
I like to ask the nerdiest questions on this. Can you please talk about the challenge of getting your mix over to those boombox and iPod speakers and all that stuff?
Well, the iPod speakers I have are designed by a company called Crookwood Audio, and they're called sound buckets. And essentially, it's the shape of a bucket of paint, a 2.5 litre bucket of paint. There's a woofer in the top, and there's a tweeter on the front. But Crispin, who makes the sound buckets, they also make high-end mastering controllers. So the quality of the sound coming from the sound bucket is fantastic.
I'm looking at it on the website right now. They're brilliant. It's like this woman, having a picnic in a field with her dog, and there's a bucket sitting next to her with the speakers on it.
But it sounds great, and it gives you a very good representation of what it's like when you get down to those small speakers that people are listening to their music on all the time. Okay,
and so it Bluetooths right over to those speakers?
You can Bluetooth, but I have the ones that have the professional inputs and outputs on XLR, so you can do that.
And so you choose to have two of them, so you've got stereo. And it looks like the driver sort of fires up and the tweeter fires towards you or something.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. They're great. They sound amazing. I've used them for a very long time, and they give me such a great representation of the average stereo playback system.
Okay, that's cool. Can you qualify that sentence, they sound amazing? Because some people might hear that and go, wait, I thought it wasn't supposed to sound amazing, and that was the whole point.
Sound amazing to me means when I listen to it on that device, I get a very good idea of what it's going to sound like on multiple devices of that type. So for me, it just adds another level of certainty over what I'm listening to. I've got three main playback devices: my Dynaudio speakers, my sound buckets, and my headphones. And then if I want to go kind of even less, if I want to listen on something that's kind of like the cheapest thing that anyone ever is going to listen to on TV or old television, old radio, old phone, old speakers, I'll use my JVC boombox for that, which I had modded to take the input into.
That's great.
By the guy who did the mutator that we spoke about earlier.
Wow.
I took it down to him. I said, look, James, can you get me a decent input in here? And it just adds another level of kind of rough as it can get, what people will listen to music to now. It's the roughest way that I think people would listen to music in the 21st century.
Now, again, basic question, how do you actually route all those different speaker outputs to those? Do you just have a particular mastering, master volume knob that has multiple outputs or something?
The Apollo X4 allows you to have 3 sets of speakers.
Okay.
And you've got 2 headphones out.
That's easy.
So one of the headphones out can drive the boombox, and then I've got the speakers and the sound buckets as well. Really simple routing, really.
Okay, so next question. The sound buckets, is your approach for something like that, like you have your Dynaudio set up as a sweet spot, like a really proper setup for the speakers, but the sound buckets are also set up to be as proper as possible, or are they off to the side?
No, they're stuck between the speakers and the monitor, and they're just there. They just exist where they exist. I've had them in various places around the room. Sometimes off to the side, but generally they just sit in front of me. And I tell you what, I use them for mono quite a lot.
Yeah,
I use them as the mono speaker in the studio, which for me is still quite important.
What do you find beneficial out of mono? I mean, I agree with you, and I love discovering that and practicing it, but it's still, sometimes I like to think, well, what are we getting out of mono?
I think what I'm getting from mono is how people are listening to music when they're not sat in front of a pair of speakers.
Right.
So let's say you're working in an office and you've got a radio on, but it's actually not in front of you. It's kind of on somebody else's desk, or it's just coming through the speaker up on the wall. That's what the mono for me does. It allows me that kind of interpretation. And it also helps actually to understand whether my stereo sources and the width on the left and the right, whether it becomes too wide. Because when I go from mono to stereo and back to mono again and back to stereo, you hear the width jump, and it gives me a very good idea whether I've overcooked it or whether I've undercooked it. And I think, actually, I can bring a bit more out of the left and the right. Mm-hmm. And I don't have to kind of hide the sounds. I'm not doing something wrong. And someone told me once, if your mix sounds good in mono, it's generally going to sound good in stereo.
I found that, so I have a single Avantone speaker, the self-powered one, and I'll put it in mono and I'll click, speaker send number 2, and it'll go to that. And then I find it really fun to just turn it way down low. Yeah. And then, because I feel like I'm only making decisions about the mid-range at that point, and I'm just saying, am I hearing all the instruments I want to hear at this low mid-range level? And it's just, it's sort of fun. You kind of have to tell people to shut up in the control room when you do that. Yeah. But it's also, it's just so restful on my ears. It's like I'm not beating myself up with the sound, which can happen when you're trying to, judge the kick and the bass and all these big power elements, and you feel like you have to turn your speakers up to see if your mix will crank well and all that.
I mean, I generally start my mixes really loud, and by the time I've got to the last half an hour, it's almost at a level where you're going, I can't hear anything. What are you listening for? Speaking to me.
Yeah.
And I'm listening for the general vibe of what's coming out of the speaker at the smallest possible volume that I can hear. Because if I get the balance of the mix coming out properly, again, I'm fairly certain that the intention that I'm trying to deliver to the client is going to be there.
Yeah.
You know, and
at the low level on the mix buckets, you mean?
Yes.
And you move back over, yeah.
And I think, because I think what people maybe need to remember is the record doesn't belong to me. The record belongs to the client. And all I'm doing when I'm working on my own initially is I am just trying to get a representation of how I hear the record. And at some point, I hand it over to the client, and the client then becomes the steer, they becomes the driver of the boat or the driver of the car, and tells me where we should be going with the mix.
Yeah.
But once I get to that place where I'm happy for the client to listen to it, I'm fairly certain at that point it has all of the elements and the makeup of what it is I hear within the track. The vibe of the track, not the individual sounds, because individual sounds can go up and down, but it's the vibe that I want to communicate with the client first and foremost.
So one of the things that I've experienced on the small speaker also is it helps me know if I mix the effects loud enough, because sometimes I think I did it right, and then I turn it down and I'm like, oh, it just sounds like plain Jane and I'm not getting anything. No disrespect to you, Jane. That's, you know what I mean?
Or it can go the other way, right? I mean, you know, the lower you listen to something, sometimes things sound sharper. You know, you're not at such a low volume, you're not looking for things that are going to make you dance or make you kind of feel, you're not going to feel anything. You're listening at that point. Yeah. When you're listening to it loud, you're feeling things. You're feeling the air from the speaker and the sound traveling to you. I think at those volumes, you're listening, and you're actually critically listening for your interpretation of what you think the record should sound like, and whether the balance between the keyboards, the guitars, the drums, the bass are right. And if they're not, that's the opportunity where you'll hear them. That's another opportunity for you to hear them and make adjustments, really. It's all about making adjustments and giving yourself opportunities.
So I know what was coming to mind, too. I once heard Andrew Sheps say this kind of brilliant statement about he used to send off a mix to a client, you know, that first print of the mix, and he'd put these lines of caveat in the email, like, well, except this. And then finally he said he taught himself to just go through and just go, well, before you hit send on the email, I'll just go address each one of those until there was no more caveat lines. And then he knew he was ready to send the mix over. Talk a little bit about when we can know that it's time to play the mix to somebody else. And so we aren't necessarily bringing them in too soon into the conversation.
When I discuss things at university with my students, the thing that I say to them is something along the lines of, don't play me something that you're not happy with. If you know that something isn't right, or if you know that you want to fix something, don't play it to me until you've addressed those things. Because generally, if I feel that something isn't right, I know someone else is going to tell me that something isn't right, and it's generally going to be that thing I think isn't right, if that makes any sense. So I've learned to not be told that things aren't correct. There's a big difference between that's wrong and I prefer. Yeah, because taste is whether you have something up or down. Wrong is, well, that isn't right. It's too loud, or there's something wrong with the editing on that track, or the sound isn't correct at this point. And you've got to be confident that when you send the client that mix, you know that for what they're going to hear, everything that you wanted to achieve is done. And there's obviously, I'm going to caveat that by saying I'm not necessarily going to spend hours fixing and automating loads of things, because the client might not want that. The client might just go, you know all that stuff that you spent 5 hours doing? I don't like any of it. Get rid of it all. And so there becomes a thing of ego, where you have to be, what, you don't like what I've done? How dare you? And you've got to kind of teach yourself that actually it's not your record. I'm not making Kevin Paul's record. I'm making the client's record. So I like to get it to 90% done, and then the client takes over and adds the 10% or the 15% of their own marking on it. Because that way the client feels involved, which they should do, it's theirs. And also I don't have to kind of suffer I don't have to deal with I don't have to deal with myself. I don't have to deal with the rejection of someone saying they don't like something, because that's a big thing that you have to learn to deal with as a producer, as a mixer, as a recording engineer. You have to learn to deal with rejection, because it's not personal.
Yeah.
It doesn't represent me. It's not a critique of me. It's just a critique of the moment that the artist is listening.
Yes. Yes. OWC is your one-stop shop for flexible drive storage and connectivity solutions for your studio. The Mini Stack STX for your Mac Mini adds 2 additional drives over a universal SATA HDD SSD bay and an NVMe M.2 PCIe SSD, plus 3 additional Thunderbolt USB-C ports. The OWC Thunder Bay 4 chassis, built like a tank, gives you 4 hot-swappable 2.5-inch RAID configurable drive bays, plus an extra Thunderbolt 3 jack for daisy chaining up to 5 devices. Or check out the OWC Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock with 2 RAID configurable drives and 7 ports of connectivity, including a front-side SD card reader, 1 gig Ethernet, 2 USB 3.2 ports, a dedicated display port, and an additional backward-compatible Thunderbolt port. Get your studio connected with the Mini Stack STX, Thunder Bay 4, and Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock at macsales.com/rockstars. Use the custom link in our show notes because it's a great way for you to help support this podcast. So thanks, Rockstars. As we were establishing before, we've already learned that when they tell us to throw away the 5 hours of work rather than getting hurt by it, we say, fantastic, because that's a big win. It means we're headed in the right direction, Yeah,
exactly.
One of the things I learned when I was looking at Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism was this concept of leaning into the sharp points. And I always thought that was a really interesting concept. It's like,
I like that. Take
all those things that feel like sharp points and just know that it means everything's working, and you just lean into it. And another little takeaway is, it doesn't mean if you get the criticism and it kind of sucks a little bit and you got to go do some more stuff, it doesn't necessarily mean you got to go do it right this second and not take a break for tonight and come back tomorrow and skip family time and whatever. You can still have your own personal boundaries that are these are sacred to me. But when you come back into the studio, it's fresh on a fresh day, just address it. And, I also like that you said to your students, you said, go back, don't come back until you've addressed the problem. That's different from saying don't come back till you've fixed the problem.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the challenges is we expect ourselves to fix things, and sometimes we can't. Sometimes all we can do is address it until we look at it and say, I've addressed it 5 different ways and it didn't get better. Yeah. The first way is the way to go, Yeah,
exactly. And that's important, I think, as for any person learning to mix their own stuff, for instance, or when you first start out mixing for other people, You know, you're given a responsibility by the client to produce something that they are going to be happy with. It's not about you producing something for you. I've got to be happy with it. But if the client doesn't like what I do, or they prefer it another way, that's it. That's where we're going. And I've got to be prepared to get on board with them and allow them to steer me and allow them to go, okay, you know that thing that you did, I kind of like some of it, but can we take the bit that I do like and then add the little bits that I want? Because that's where I feel really comfortable with the record being. And if you can do that, and if you can learn to do that, I think you have an ability to forge a career for yourself. You know, I remember the first time someone told me they didn't like something, it was almost heartbreaking. You know, you almost think that's it. It's over. I'm no good. You know, but actually you've just got to go, oh, okay, he just didn't like that thing. It doesn't mean that he hates me and what I do and who I am. You know, we're sensitive people. You know, we're all sensitive.
Yeah.
And we all deal with that. And, you know, I mean, and I've worked with the best mixing engineers in the world, and they will all say the same thing. It's really difficult to take criticism until you realizing that the criticism isn't about you. It's just about that moment.
Yeah. I remember early on, I was working with a client that I worked with for many years. And, you know, he'd walk in the studio and he'd be like, that sounds like shit. And it's funny, that should hurt your feelings. But at the time, I think I was already at a point where I was like, I appreciated that. I'd much rather figure out what we're supposed to do than get stuck. And so what I like about that sounds like shit is it's an immediate delete. You don't have to like, you know, have say 10 more things back and forth about it, you know? Yeah. And have you also found, you've worked with other mixers, so you've also experienced taking what you've put your creative energy into and handing it off to somebody. And one of it's like being on the other side of the glass as a musician. It's so helpful to understand what the other experience is. When I hand off my stuff, I'm struck with just how difficult it is to communicate to somebody else what you like or don't like about what they're doing. It's really hard to do.
Yeah, it is. It's not easy at all, right?
Yeah, and it's like, you know, sometimes it's easier to communicate the things you don't like about something than it is to say the things that you do like, and here's what else I would like, you know?
Yeah, and I guess those things do come from experience, Lidge. I think they do. They come from an ability to separate yourself emotionally from what's going on.
Yeah,
you know? And I think when you get to that point in your career where you can do that, and I think there's the point really where you can, you know, forge yourself. I think you've got I think you've got an ability to have a career if you can get to that place, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. It doesn't mean it's necessarily easy. It does wear you out when people are telling you this stuff's not good.
It isn't easy. But hey.
Well, so let's keep jumping forward. What about how do you like to interface with the computer? Are you all about a mouse, a trackball? Do you like to have a box with faders on it and mutes?
Well, I've spent so many years trying to find the ultimate controller or controllers, and I can't find anything that's quicker than me and a mouse, unfortunately. I love a desk. I love the feel of touching something and it moving. I've tried touch screens, big touch screens, iPads. I've got a PreSonus Faderport 16 in the studio. I've had an SSL Nucleus. The problem with software controllers for me is that there's not one plug-in controller that can do everything that a desk can do. It's not possible, and I don't have enough space for a desk. And even if I had a desk like a S4 or something huge, I'd probably still use the mouse and the point and click. I've used it for 25 years. I know exactly where I'm going. I'm praying that they come up with something that allows me to get rid of the computer. I'd love an instrument that would get rid of keyboard and mouse. I'd love that, because I do enjoy the touch and the feel of a fader and a dial. And one of your questions that you sent me previously was, what's your favorite hardware tool?
Yeah.
And my answer is the desk.
Yeah.
I love a big console, and I love the manipulation of a console. It's such a beautiful interface between me and the speakers.
It's it's one of the few instruments we ever get to play as an engineer.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. If you play a guitar, you have this physical interaction that's immediate and as analog as it gets, between your fingers and strings and everything in your ears. And the same with other instruments. But with engineering, we've always been faced with, either some version of that or some facsimile of playing an instrument.
And look, don't get me wrong. I love digital. I love Pro Tools. I love all my plugins. I love the sound now that we can create in the digital domain. I'm 100% happy with the sound that comes out of the speakers now. I think that will only get better and better. But in terms of that interface, like I say, I got a fader board 16, but it's only 16 faders, which means I have to press a button to find channel 17. Yeah. I don't want to do that. I want to just touch channel 17.
Yeah.
And the moment that, for me, I think, and I'm just realizing this talking to you, I think, the moment I have to press a button to do a command that doesn't allow me just to reach out and touch something, it becomes a computer interface rather than an audio interface. And if I'm going to use a computer interface, I can use my mouse and pointer, and I'm there in like seconds.
Yeah. And I think the challenge for me is the moment I have to press a button in order to go to the place I want to be, especially with not enough faders, is I've now switched from my brain. I'm very focused on one thing at a time in a way. And I also am very spatial oriented. So I'm constructing this whole mental image in my head of where things are inside the screen, while I'm working, and where things are inside the sound. And on a real console, I assign in my brain that the vocal is always over here in this one location. And the moment that becomes a moving target, now I have to shift mental gears. I have to stop being the thinker, and I have to switch, and I have to, find my GPS to the fader and then switch back to my mixing mode. And that's where it sort of trips me up a little bit. So
and on the computer, my vocal is always colored red. So I can really see it quicker than I can see it on the fader port. Because on the fader port, I've got to read something, whereas on the computer screen, I just have to see it really quickly. And it's only a nanosecond difference, but it's that difference that, like you say, I think is actually quite right. You almost have to go, there, and you've lost your thoughts. You've lost your creative situation that you were in. Whereas with the mouse, I've got peripheral vision that allows me to see 17, 24, 48 faders at once really quickly. I know from the layout that my drums are at the top, my vocals are at the bottom. I know everything where it is, like it would be on the desk, and it just allows me. I've tried everything to come away from the fader and mouse, the mouse and keyboard. I've tried everything.
I'm still there now.
Coming back to that baby.
I'm still there. I'm still a believer, and I at the moment I have the SSL UF8s set up, and I'm learning those, and I've explored the Avid S1s, and I know that when I find, I know that in order, and this is sort of a takeaway for you rock stars, is I feel like for myself, whenever I'm gonna try something, you gotta let yourself sort of both feet jump in for a little while, for long enough to really say like, okay, I tried out, I came up with a workflow. Is it working for me? And then that's when you find out. So I try not to kind of like songwriting. I can't shut down an idea the moment I come up with it, you know? But also to your point, Kevin, when you're talking about that nanosecond, it reminds me of being in the middle of a guitar solo. And when you're playing music with a band and the moment you're like, wow, we really got it, you just lost it, you know?
Yeah. The moment you think about it, it's gone. Yeah.
So it's like that.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's see. Before we jump to our closing questions here too, let's talk about Atmos and mixing. And we've sort of gotten thank you for painting a picture of your studio. It's awesome. And it's great. Rockstars, again, I encourage you to go listen to the playlist. And when you hear the level of quality that Kevin produces, and he's working with the same stuff you're working with, you can make
definitely.
It'll really raise the bar for you. But now mixing in Atmos and immersive, talk to us a little bit about that. You say you've got headphones that help you do some of these things. We certainly hear stories about people installing this array of Dolby speakers that are Dolby aligned around the head and the room. Gets more complex. What do we need to know about that, and what should we get excited about? And where do we just begin?
Well, I think I've taught for a long time surround sound mixing, and the surround sound that I spoke about was 5.1. And I've done that for many years. I've mixed a lot of albums in surround. I've done about 40 albums in surround. And I really love the immersive surround Atmos environment. I think it's a great way to listen to music. I think it adds another level of experience for the listener. I used to speak many times in my lectures at university where I would actively encourage my students to go out and think about developing the one file format, the multi-file format for the music industry, and Dolby, and somehow Dolby have managed to find themselves as the provider to the music industry, which I think is great, of the multi-file format. And that's brilliant. I think the concept around Atmos is exactly what the music industry needs. I think the setup...
No. Let me pause right there. Why is it exactly what the music industry needs? Why do we need that?
A multi-file format? We need a multi-file format because if we're going to embrace technology in the way that technology is developing, we need a format that allows a machine to detect what form of playback is happening at that time. Okay. So the Atmos format allows the playback of the material to know, oh, well, this is stereo, well, this is multi-channel, well, this is 5.1. And that concept and that technology was exactly what I was talking about to my students. You know, I said the person or persons that come up with that format, they're going to be very successful. And lo and behold, typically of the music industry, they were not interested in it. And when I say the music industry, what I really mean is major record labels. They weren't interested in the format of playback of music, just like they weren't interested in the internet and just like they weren't interested in mono and stereo. They quite frankly didn't care how people consumed music. And it was only because of technophiles and music people who loved music that these changes have happened. So for me, that's a really great idea. Yeah, you've got to have a different setup in the studio, and a lot of time and money has been invested by a lot of studios to allow the construction of records in Atmos. And I think that's brilliant. What needs to happen, though, for me, is that artists need to be convinced that this is a way to go about making records. And again, I kind of use this analogy when I'm talking about stuff at university. I say, well, look, if you look at the changeover between mono and stereo, that took about 20 years. Yeah. And even then, when they were making records in stereo first, they had drums on the left, vocals on the right. And then obviously they realized that they was, once they stopped taking whatever substances they took, and they settled down, they realized actually you can't listen to music like that. Let's find a way of presenting music to people.
Well, they also had to make records that explained what stereo was. And so
yes,
I'm now in your left speaker. I'm now in your right speaker.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what Apple having an immersive audio playlist is too.
Exactly. And what I think about Atmos is, forget about all the 5.1 stuff that happened 15 years ago. Ground zero for Atmos is where we are at the moment. Immersive audio, so 2 or 3 years old maximum, really. So we've still got 15 or so years to convince people that Atmos can be the medium of choice for the listener. And I think as changes and technology advances with film, with television, and media in general, come around radio even, I think once those things get established, lots more artists will start to make music in Atmos. My worry as a maker of multi-channel immersive audio is that the music industry, and again, music industry meaning record companies, I'm slightly skeptical that they see Atmos as a marketing tool, because they're happy to make back catalogue available just so they can get their records at the right playlist at Apple.
Yeah. I'm quite certain that that's what they're interested in.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a big worry, because they need to make the budgets for Atmos making records bigger. And record companies are doing really well at the moment. They're making more money than they've made in the last 15 to 20 years.
Wow.
And they need to start investing at the grassroots end, the artist end of making records.
And that's something you probably experienced a real understanding of that world when you were at Mute Records.
Yeah, absolutely. Every penny as an independent label had to be accounted for. But Daniel, he was a forward thinker. So he was always looking to develop those technologies. He'd be the first person to go, I really like that. We need to make stuff in that format, And I do hope that artists and producers can be encouraged to make records from the scratch in Atmos. Put up a couple of extra microphones.
Yeah.
Record a couple of more guitar parts, reamp more keyboard parts, add a few more. I get sessions where there's 50 vocal tracks. Well, in stereo, I probably mute 20 of those because you can't hear them. But in Atmos, I could use them all.
Wow.
And it would sound incredible. Instead of, I could have 10 in each, I could have 1 in each speaker and it would sound amazing, or 5 in each speaker, and it would sound amazing, And I think if artists want to make records that are deeper, that are wider, that are bigger than they've ever made, Atmos is the perfect medium for it.
I think it's exciting. I'm looking forward to that. Adam Audio introduces the all-new A-Series line of monitors, featuring the XART accelerated ribbon tweeter design, built-in DSP-based room correction, and speaker voicings, allowing you to customize your Adam Audio monitors to your control room. The A-Series will rock in any studio. Small studio spaces or immersive multi-speaker configurations are perfect for the A4V or the new A7V, the next generation of the incredibly popular A7X. Mid-sized rooms and narrow spaces will love the low-profile A44H, expanding on the A7V sound, or the A77H, a true three-way midfield monitor delivering rich, spacious sound. And bigger studios will love the A8H, a three-way speaker and the pinnacle of the A-Series that delivers extremely accurate sound required for critical listening environments. Get the Adam Audio monitors and subwoofers that are right for your studio with an extended 5-year warranty at adamaudio.com. What about for those of us who are creating in-home studios? Plus, remember, a lot of creation, regardless of whether it's going to get mixed in an Atmos room, is going to start out in a home studio or a simple studio environment.
Yeah.
How do we address that as creators? Do we get into the headphone world and start making decisions there? And what are your thoughts there?
My thoughts are, do you know what? I think because you don't need 9.4.1 to make Atmos. You can make Atmos in 5.1. So you can just have 6 speakers in the studio and you can still make Atmos. You can still get into the concept of immersive audio. And then you can use headphones to make 7.1.4. And then if you go to, or lucky enough to go to a big studio, 9.1.4, the whole concept of Atmos, as we know, is no matter what size of system, you get an exact replica of the playback. So it doesn't matter with the object-based audio, it doesn't matter how many speakers, it's not speaker-based, it's not channel-based. And I think people really need to understand that. And I'm sure if we spoke to, people like Andrew Sheps that you mentioned earlier, and there's some great people out in Nashville that are doing loads of amazing Atmos stuff, and I'm sure if you talk to them, when you first started working in Atmos, you're scratching your head going, object audio, channel-based audio, what's the difference? And it takes quite a while to really kind of understand that. But once you understand that concept of how Atmos plays back, you get to realize that I can make a great Atmos in 5.1 record and it will sound amazing in 7.4.1. It will still have the same kind of width, depth, and height that we're looking for.
That's fascinating. And then I don't know if you've conspicuously not said headphones yet, but
no.
You're listening and you've got a pair of headphones that are designed for that. What kind of experience? I mean, do you recommend that we even experiment with that? Should we start mixing in headphones in Atmos to just try it out to start out?
Absolutely. And I think the headphone thing is more about binaural than Atmos. It's a spin-off.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, again, we have to understand what binaural is, and binaural processing will get better the longer it continues to develop. And because at the moment there's a bit of kind of apprehension about the space that binaural puts onto your sounds, near, far, or off, or medium, things like that. And I think once we can establish those rules for how the playback works in binaural, the more immersive the headphone experience will be. I think it's 80% there, but it's that 20% that's missing, I think is the really important 20% for us to really go, oh, hang on, this sounds amazing now.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds as big as it did in a 7.1.4 studio. When I'm mixing records in Atmos, again, I will do a lot of work on headphones, and then I will take it to, I don't have Atmos here in my studio.
Right.
I always go to other studios to do that because I want to hear it in bigger spaces. I just don't have the space here to put that many speakers.
Yeah, well, like you pointed out at the beginning, the studio is now at the end of the journey.
Absolutely, yeah, rather than the beginning.
That's fascinating.
You know, and I think my kind of words would be to producers and artists is play with it, try it, experiment with it, and let's see where it goes in 5 years' time.
Yeah.
If we make the content, people will want to hear it because it does sound better than stereo. It's much more immersive. I know there's a couple of doubters. There's a couple of people who say that stereo is the best way to listen to music, and there's probably some validity around that for now, because we're still in the infancy of finding out how to present these records to people.
Well, I also think that as long as we're remixing back catalog and we're just comparing an Atmos mix to the original, it's like, what's the point? It's like the only version of an Atmos mix that somebody comparing is going to think is spot on is the one that sounds exactly like the stereo and doesn't have any Atmos on it, potentially. So it's like, it is new territory. And I think sometimes what's missing is a confusion around the either or aspect of it, or maybe you hear a stereo thing and it's got a tonality in the lows and the mids, and then you hear an Atmos one and maybe the speakers didn't adjust or something didn't adjust, and that lows and energy changed, and you thought, geez, But I've heard Atmos stuff that sounds incredible. I've seen, I've visited Chris James, who's been on the podcast, who's doing some incredible Atmos mixes, and he's done the two speakers. Here's the original mix, and then here's the Atmos, and it's like, holy shit, that's like a whole new experience. So very, very cool stuff going on.
Yeah, and when I, again, at university, when I do my 5.1 lectures, I can sell 5.1 setups out of the boot of my car all day long if I wanted to my students. Because the moment they hear the difference between stereo and surround or immersive or whatever, it's night and day. And it's the same between mono and stereo. And like I say, for us, Ground Zero, this multi-channel format is only 2 or 3 years old. Mm-hmm. I know we've had like 15 years of surrounding music, but that didn't really take off because of the format, not because of the content. The content sounded amazing, but what we need now is people to actually start making records from scratch with the Atmos being the primary source. Yeah. If you do that, we're going to have some unbelievable atmosphere. And there will be someone will break the mold and make that Dark Side of the Moon or that, Sgt. Pepper. They'll make that record and everyone goes, that's the blueprint now. Let's follow that. There's almost a pun in there, like some of the mold. I just thought of Alan Moulder. Maybe he'll come along and break something there. Come on. All right, cool. So we are approaching the end here. So let me jump forward and we'll ask some of these jam session questions and work our way to the finish line. But I know you've got some great answers for these. When you started out in recording, what do you think was holding you back? My age. I was told at 21 I was too old to start in the recording studio business. And I had to convince the manager, as I said earlier, to give me the opportunity. But the good thing is now, 21, like you're not even really considered because you still need to have the experience of the university education behind you because that university education is what you would have learnt in a big studio as a tape op. Right. Signal flow. I think this is the number one thing I'd recommend anyone wanting to get into the studio business, learn signal flow. Learn how things move around the studio. Not just your studio, but every studio in the world. And you learn that by understanding input, output. And it can be quite daunting at times. And there's different terminology in every single piece of software, every single piece of hardware, every patch bay, every input, every piece of hardware equipment have slightly different terminology for their input and output. But if you can learn all of that and understand what it means, then you've got a really good chance of getting yourself into a studio because you know how things work.
Yeah.
And that's what you need to learn from me anyway.
That's what I learned when I was in school. And then when I got out of school, I learned how records were made.
Exactly.
Okay, so next one, well, maybe you already shared this, but some of the best advice you remember receiving yourself.
Always be ready to record.
Why do we all want to always be ready to record?
So that's where the magic is.
Because the gods just came into the studio, dummy.
And I tell you one of the things actually that I learned from somebody, and it's about making a mistake. So for instance, you're not in record. Don't let the band play the best take they've ever taken before you tell them at the end that they weren't in record.
I know.
Stop immediately and go, I'm not in record. Can we start again?
Yeah.
They might not be happy with you, but they'll be hell of a lot less happy at the end of the take when they've done the best performance they've ever done and you've gone, can we do that again? Because I weren't in record. So everyone makes mistakes. Keep them down to a minimum, obviously. And always admit, I'm not ready. It's much better that you say that straight away.
Yes.
But be ready to record.
If you're going to say, can we do that again at the end of that take? Or if you're going to say, hey, do you guys want to roll one now? It should be a joke.
Oh, yeah. No.
You might get away with it if it's a joke, but not if it's real.
I tell you, I do a lot of recording with Nick Cave. And the one thing you are always ready for is just be in record, because they don't go, can we take one? Yeah. They say hello and they start playing. And if you're not ready, that's it. You've missed it.
Yeah.
So particularly with today with Pro Tools, you've got quick punch. So you don't even have to be in record. You can just be playing the the computer, and then you can pull back the fader once you go into record halfway through the song if you want.
Yeah.
But be ready to be ready. Just be ready.
Yeah. I mean, as somebody who is putting myself out there with a guitar more now, I appreciate that even more, because mentally, I'm trying to start the next song and I'm getting myself into the song and into the guitar. And internally, I know I know it's just begun. And if I have to pause, if I have to stop and now communicate with the engineer to go into record, it's the same thing as losing your groove when you're engineering and you have to stop and push the button.
Yeah. And also with computers now, you should just be in record. There's no reason not to be. I've got unlimited space on the computer. I think slightly different if you're on tape and you've got 16 minutes of tape per reel. Yeah, you have to be in record. Everyone has to know that you're recording because you've only got 16 minutes. But on a computer,
I think the self-imposed obstacles are remembering you can still be dialing the mix in slightly, even if you're in record.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, you can't necessarily add a plugin or add an insert send.
Yeah, that's not important.
But if you did want to do that, you could, you're already in record. You wouldn't stop recording if they were playing, but if they weren't playing, you can stop, add the plugin, and drop back into record so that you don't lose a moment.
Yeah, don't interrupt the magic.
Yeah. All right. How about a favorite software tool? Something that's fun to use in the studio, or something you're excited about now?
I've used this since it first came out in 2012. It's the Waves nonlinear summing plugin. I think it's one of the most flexible saturation desk emulation plugins. Yeah, there's newer versions and potentially some people would say better. But for me, the Waves nonlinear summing plugin is one of my go-to plugins in every mix since this came out. I got it across my Mixbus and I have it across many channels in the mix.
Just for a brief recap, when you think about plugins like that, or that particular one, you put one on the channel so that the kick drum is sort of working the channel the way it might work a console. And you put one on the stereo bus so that that whole mix of all those faders is pushing or driving the stereo fader like it might on a console.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then you can switch versions of consoles. You can turn up or down the drive button. Does it do some sort of like grouping matrix? Sometimes they do that sort of thing too.
They do have one, but generally I'm a 1-for-1 person. One plugin, one channel, and you've got 3 consoles. You got Spike Stents G-Series console. You got a Neve console, and then you got a classic TG EMI console. So you've got 3 different flavors. They all sound great. It's simple.
Where does it go in the plugin chain? Does your channel plugin go first on the chain or last, and the other plugins go before it? How do we think about that?
On individual instruments, it will generally be, well, it can be either first or last. It won't necessarily be in a particular place. On the Mixbus, it's always first.
Right. So,
and then I go into my mix EQ, mix compression.
Okay. All right, cool. How about a resource or tip for the business side of doing this? If the rock stars want to keep making records and mixing and have it be more than just a lifetime hobby, what advice do you have?
Oh, I thought about this one for a long time, and I wasn't quite sure what to say, and I'm not sure this might qualify, but I've come up with use the save as function. The save as function, particularly when you're recording, allows you to come back to a moment in time. And generally, I will save as recording drums, save as recording saxophone, save as recording vocals, etc., etc., etc. And with the mixing, always, when I reach a point, maybe not so much now because I kind of know where I'm going, but, for a long time it was like, I'm really happy here. I'm saving as I like it. I'm saving as this sounds good. I'm saving as et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm they're like screenshots, right? So I don't spend, save as function allows you just to capture a moment in time. When you're doing the recording, what it allows you to do is 2 months later or a week later, you can go, the artist will say, do you remember when we were recording the vocals? Can we go back to that session where we were? And you can instantly bring up the session, and everyone knows where we were at that particular point. And it's a really useful tool for me, the save as function, in terms of organizing yourself on the computer when potentially you can be working with hundreds and hundreds of files and lots of sessions.
Do you ever feel like the time that you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has gotten you nowhere? Have you been looking for a simple, straightforward, step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take you years to learn? What if you could have a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is just for you. Now you can discover the proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Listen to this quote from one of our students, David, quote, "Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information and mentoring on the mix process that I've ever been a part of. That was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, but condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session," close quote. Look, I'm so confident that this will take your mixes to the next level that if you can't get a killer mix within 30 days, I'll give you a full refund, no questions asked. So if you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and start now by checking out the free preview of the Ultimate Snare Mixing Trick. And I'll see you at the front row table of the Grammys. Cheers. All right. So this is a message to Pro Tools. This is a message to any other DAW or DAW manufacturer. Include with save as, include a checkbox that will lock the session right after you close it. So you save as, or somewhere when you close the session, so that it's locked, so you can't open it and save over it. And then also make sure that the bounce file matches the name of the save as, so that we can be working and just print off a version. It's locked in time and we can always come back to it. That rough mix equals exactly that session and you can't screw them up. I can't tell you how many times I reopen that session and I'm like, Lidge, remember to save a new version of it and move forward. And then sometimes I do a move and I forget. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that would be a great function if you're listening, Avid.
If you're listening. All right. How about a tip or online resource for the organizational aspect of the studio? Kevin, how do we keep our shit together?
Well, this is something that I had to learn in a very painful way many years ago. Unfortunately, my studio was broken into and the whole studio was taken, including all my backups. Everything was taken from the studio. So I came up with a very comprehensive way of backing up everything into the cloud. But one of the things that I back up on their own is I back up just the Pro Tools. I'm working in Pro Tools here. Obviously, it would be different DAWs for other listeners, but I back up just my audio, my Pro Tools session files. I back them up to a remote place, specifically on their own, separate from all of my files. So I have main computer, backup, and then online, I have a complete backup online, but I also have a separate backup of just the session files. What that allows me to do, God forbid, if I lose anything, particularly when I'm working with clients online, is to get myself up and going really quickly. All I have to do is to say to the client, can you send me the files again? I can then drop the files into the copy of the save session online. And essentially I'm up and running like literally within a matter of hours. Whereas if you have to download all the audio files again, generally those cloud-based systems, when it comes to large files, it takes a very long time to download them because, it's just because of the manner of how these systems work. So for me, splitting the saving of just the session file, because the session file is kilobytes large, it's not gigabytes, I can access them really quickly. And you can use software. Let me think of what software do I use? I use
I use one called Backblaze. Is that what you use?
I use Backblaze for the general backup. Mm-hmm. That's all my files are backed up online because Backblaze allows me unlimited space. Mm-hmm. There's very few online backups that have unlimited storage space.
And I'll add to your point, because I recently had to recover off of Backblaze, and I was so excited that they'll let me download it. Oh, they'll send me a hard drive. They did both those things, and they both worked, but it took days before I finally had the files reloaded. Yeah. So now to your point, I really get what you're getting at, which is if you can have just the Pro Tools session file somewhere else, and now maybe the client is just delivering through Dropbox where it's like zoop, and there's all the audio. 10 gigs, even 100 gigs down off of Dropbox, it's not that hard anymore, I don't think.
Well, don't forget, the download speed of Dropbox is much quicker than Backblaze.
Yeah.
Backblaze will take 1%. Dropbox will be 1% Backblaze of the time that it will take for Backblaze to do it. I had to do that. I did the same thing. I thought, oh, great, I'll go to Backblaze, and it took 5, because I'm outside the USA, so they won't send me the hard drive. But it would take me 5 days to download a session.
Right, so I guess you could just actually back up your PTX files to Dropbox in fact.
Yeah,
even.
exactly. Yeah, and you can automate that process.
Yeah.
You can automate that. And
All
I
right.
find that very useful.
That's great. Great tip. All right. So here's one. I haven't even asked this in a while. Imagine that you had to start all over, or you're giving advice to somebody who's starting out and they needed a simple sort of studio setup. They need to find people to work with, and they got to sort of make ends meet to survive, to begin making records. What advice would you give to somebody? I mean, you're giving advice to students on how to get started. That's basically what the question is.
I think if you want a career in the audio industry, not just the music industry, I think nowadays people that go to universities and online courses and stuff, I think you have to be prepared if you want for a career in the audio industry is give yourself as much experience across as many disciplines as possible, whether that's fixing stuff for film, TV, music, podcast, anything to do with audio, get those skills under your belt. You'll be more useful to an organization. So many organizations, when they're looking for startup people, they're looking for someone that can offer them a little bit more than, I know how to use Pro Tools.
Yeah.
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 So for me, make sure that you've got multiple disciplines and make sure that you are hungry enough and determined enough to stick it out, because it's incredibly competitive. There's many institutions churning out people for careers. Not everyone that goes to Full Sail or SAE wants to become an audio engineer or mixer producer. Some people just want to do it for their own self. But even if those half a dozen people in each of those institutions want to be engineers and producers, you've got to be really competitive and incredibly disciplined and committed to the craft.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna suggest that what you learn crossing over, it happens to me all the time. There's tons of stuff I've learned that helped me in music by doing podcasts. There's tons of stuff that have helped me in podcasts by doing music. Definitely that, because I started out in music first. But I mean, even just like cool editing tricks, that doing a podcast forced me to figure out. And now if I need to do music, it'd be like, that's a breeze. I know how to do that,
Well, the iTunes stuff that you spoke about me doing at the top of the interview, all of that came from doing podcasts for Apple. All of those iTunes festivals that we did, 5 years of huge artists once a year at the Roundhouse in London, 50 to 60 bands every year, all came from us doing podcasts for Apple.
That's great.
At the Apple Store in London.
That's that testament to the idea of like, you never know what door is going to open by a certain experience.
Yeah,
I mean,
100%.
Similar to yours, I did one session at the studio I was starting out at, and I did the session that the studio owners didn't want to do. They asked me if I'd do it. I was like, and I just had to run around and like, run around like crazy all day. And I did a good job on it. And then I got asked to start the Bonnaroo Hay Bale studio, and that became a 15-year career right there.
There you go. It's as simple as that. Enthusiasm goes a long way. Yeah,
exactly. And I was glad to do the gig, but it's fair to describe it as the gig nobody else wanted to do.
That's great.
All right. So here we go. The last question is hypothetical. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine, Kev. And you go back in time and you find your young self who's going like the Kinks, who's that? Or whatever, whoever you were at that time. And you say, listen, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know, young Padawan Kevin Paul, to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice would you like to go back and give yourself?
It's quite simple. Don't worry. Don't worry so much. Worrying is an instant vibe killer. And when you start out, it's the one thing that prevents you from being as creative as you might want to be. Enjoy what you're doing. You can do all of the worrying you want when the session is finished and you've gone home and you've overanalyzed your record for the umpteenth time. But while you're in the studio, in the moment, I think we call it being present now.
Yeah.
Don't we? Yeah. Stay as much as you can being present in the studio, because worrying about whether things sound good or not is completely subjective. That's just your opinion. And you can do all that reflection once the session's finished.
And your opinion's going to change in 6 months, which is the magic window of time for you to go from hating a record you did to loving a record you did.
And it could change in 6 seconds. You could hate it 1 minute, what you're listening to, and then something happens and all of a sudden you're loving it.
Yeah.
Just enjoy it. I think that would be my biggest message to myself, my younger self, would be just in the studio, enjoy what you're doing and do the reflection and the soul beating and the nagging of the voice on your shoulder, telling you that you're no good, telling you why you're doing this. That guy, he can show up when the session's over. But while you're there, just enjoy it.
I'll add to that, Rockstars, that that worrying that you're doing that's keeping you up all night and not letting you sleep, it might actually just be all the coffee you're drinking in the studio. Kevin, such a great pleasure to have you here on the podcast, man. Your music just sounds fantastic, Rockstars. I encourage you again to go listen to the playlist. It is really top shelf stuff. And you were talking about your bucket speakers, which now I'm of course going to have to go get a pair of those.
Great.
But one of the speakers that I have here that I was listening on, where your playlist really stood out, are these. Do you remember the Bose desktop ones, the Companion 2s or whatever? I'm going back to early 2000s probably. These gray ones, the
long thin one, or
tall thin ones. No, not the ones that you would stick underneath the kitchen cabinet, but the tall.
Oh, I know. Then they had it was sort of a sail shape, like on either side.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and it just really sounded good. So, go listen to that music, Rockstars. Kevin, let the Rockstars know, how can they find you online? Where should they go to check out stuff? What if they're just ready to reach out to you and make their next hit record, or they got questions that they just can't figure out?
You can reach out to me on my website, which is at kevin-paul.com. You can find me on Instagram at kpmixbus. And if you want to email me, you can email me through the website. There's a contact page on the website, and I'll do my best to answer all of them as quick as I can.
That's awesome. And Rockstars, please remember to go check out Kevin's podcast, Mixbus with Kevin Paul. And I know there's a bunch of great stuff there. So thank you so much for listening, Rockstars. Kevin, it's an absolute honor to hang with you, and pleasure to talk record making with you, man. Thanks for taking time out.
Pleasure's all mine. Seriously.
I look forward to seeing you around the studio.
Yeah, definitely. When you come to London, make sure you hook me up.
All right, absolutely. Cheers.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this episode possible: OWC, Lewitt, Atom Audio, Isotope, and Spectra 1964. And remember, at iZotope.com/rockstars, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, then please check out our sponsors using the link in our show notes, because it's a great way to help support this show. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko and Braden Stremming, for additional podcasts and video production. Thanks so much for listening, Rockstars, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.